When I found myself staring blankly at my phone, the messages from my ex haunting me like a ghost, I never expected the night to take a turn. Heartbreak had become a familiar ache, and I felt lost in the chaos of my emotions. Just as I was about to drown in my thoughts, the door swung open, and in waltzed my Aunt Linda with her friend Karen right behind her, both of them giggling and a little unsteady on their feet. They had just come from a family gathering, and clearly the wine had been flowing. "We heard you needed some company," Aunt Linda declared, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Before I could protest, she plopped down on the couch beside me, while Karen flopped dramatically onto the other side. "Tell us everything," she urged, her voice booming with enthusiasm. I hesitated, feeling vulnerable, but their infectious energy was hard to resist. As I began recounting the saga of my broken heart, they listened intently, nodding and interjecting with their own dramatic experiences. "Let me tell you about my first love," Aunt Linda said, launching into a story that had me both cringing and laughing. She shared tales of her own heartbreaks, her exaggerated expressions turning every detail into a comedic performance. Karen chimed in with her own misadventures, and soon we were all laughing, the tension in the room lifting. It was the first time in days that I felt a flicker of happiness. As the night wore on, Aunt Linda rummaged through the kitchen and emerged with a half-empty bottle of wine. "This calls for a toast," she announced, raising her glass. I hesitated but joined in, lifting my own glass as we toasted to resilience and new beginnings. The wine flowed freely, and soon we were sharing embarrassing stories, laughing until our sides hurt. Aunt Linda and Karen's carefree attitude was contagious. They began a silly game of charades, and watching them act out ridiculous scenes while giggling uncontrollably brought a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in ages. Their antics reminded me that life goes on, no matter how heavy the heart feels. I joined in, the laughter spilling out of me like a long-buried treasure. At one point, Aunt Linda leaned over, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, darling, heartbreak is just life's way of saying, hey, you deserve better. You'll find someone who matches your vibe." Her wisdom, albeit slightly slurred, struck a chord. I realized that perhaps this experience was just a stepping stone towards something better. Then came the climactic moment of the night. As we were wrapped in laughter, Karen suddenly stood up, her expression serious. "Okay, everyone, it's time for the dance-off," she declared. The music blared from my phone, and they began to dance wildly, embodying every ridiculous move they could muster. I watched, astonished, as Aunt Linda attempted to do the worm, her dignity lost somewhere between the couch and the floor. I couldn't help but join in, letting go of my inhibitions, laughing at the absurdity of it all. Finally, as the clock ticked closer to midnight, the energy began to wind down. We settled back onto the couch, breathless and happy. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. Aunt Linda, her eyes still sparkling, leaned over and said, "Remember, sweetheart, life is messy, but so are we. Embrace it." The night ended with warm hugs and promises of more evenings like this. As I finally climbed into bed, I realized that I had been given a gift. The reminder that in the midst of heartbreak, laughter and love still existed. The world didn't stop. It spun on, filled with people who cared. I felt hopeful again, knowing that my journey was just beginning. When I found myself staring blankly at my phone, the messages from my ex haunting me like a ghost, I never expected the night to take a turn. Heartbreak had become a familiar ache, and I felt lost in the chaos of my emotions. Just as I was about to drown in my thoughts, the door swung open, and in waltzed my Aunt Linda with her friend Karen right behind her, both of them giggling and a little unsteady on their feet. They had just come from a family gathering, and clearly the wine had been flowing. "We heard you needed some company," Aunt Linda declared, her eyes twinkling with mischief. With her wild curls and vibrant personality, she had always been the life of the party, a stark contrast to my current mood. Before I could protest, she plopped down on the couch beside me, while Karen flopped dramatically onto the other side. "Tell us everything," she urged, her voice booming with enthusiasm. I hesitated, feeling vulnerable, but their infectious energy was hard to resist. I began recounting the saga of my broken heart, how my relationship had started with such promise, but had ended in confusion and tears. As I spoke, Aunt Linda and Karen listened intently, nodding and interjecting with their own dramatic experiences. "Ah, let me tell you about my first love," Aunt Linda said, launching into a story about a boy named Jake, who had been her high school sweetheart. Her exaggerated expressions turned every detail into a comedic performance. He was so handsome, but he was also a complete disaster. I found out he was still dating someone else. I threw a cake at him. The image of Aunt Linda, cake flying through the air, had me laughing despite myself. Karen chimed in with her own misadventures, and soon we were all laughing, the tension in the room lifting. Aunt Linda rummed a half-empty bottle of wine. "This calls for a toast," she announced, raising her glass. I hesitated but joined in, lifting my own glass as we toasted to resilience and new beginnings. As we shared embarrassing stories, I felt a sense of camaraderie growing between us. Aunt Linda and Karen's carefree attitude was contagious. They began a silly game of charades, and watching them act out ridiculous scenes while giggling uncontrollably brought a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in ages. I joined in, letting go of my inhibitions, laughing at the absurdity of it all. The evening reached a peak when Karen suddenly declared it was time for a dance-off. The music blared from my phone and she began to dance wildly, her arms flailing in an exaggerated manner. Aunt Linda jumped in, attempting to do the worm. I watched, astonished, as she flopped around on the floor, her dignity lost somewhere between the couch and the coffee table. I couldn't help but join in, moving my body freely, letting the rhythm guide me. The laughter was infectious. We were a ridiculous trio, dancing like no one was watching, the stress of the week fading away. At one point, Aunt Linda paused mid-worm to proclaim, "This is what life is about, dancing through the mess." Her words resonated with me. Perhaps my heartbreak was just a chapter in a much larger story. As the night wore on, we settled back onto the couch, breathless and happy. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. Aunt Linda, her cheeks flushed, leaned over and said, "Remember, sweetheart, life is messy, but so are we. Embrace it." In that moment, I realized how much I needed this chaos. I had been so consumed by my heartache that I had forgotten how to laugh. The night ended with warm hugs and promises of more evenings like this. I felt grateful for my aunt and her friend, who had unknowingly pulled me back from the brink of despair. As I finally climbed into bed, I reflected on the evening. I had been given a gift, the reminder that in the midst of heartbreak, laughter and love still existed. I had a family who cared, friends who would lift me up, and a life that, while messy, was still worth celebrating. The next morning, I woke with a clearer head. The heaviness in my heart had lightened, and I felt a renewed sense of hope. I texted Aunt Linda and Karen, thanking them for the incredible night. They responded instantly, planning our next get-together, promising more laughter and more ridiculous stories. I realized then that healing takes time, but it also requires connection. In that chaotic, joy-filled night, my aunt and her friend had reminded me that it was okay to be vulnerable, to lean on others, and to find joy even in the darkest moments. As I stepped into a new day, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through my curtains, casting a warm glow over my room. I lay in bed, replaying the previous night's events in my mind. The laughter, the dance-off, and Aunt Linda's outrageous stories felt like a balm to my wounded heart. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a spark of hope that had been dim for too long. As I got up and prepared breakfast, I thought about how important those connections were. Aunt Linda had always been a beacon of light in our family, her stories a blend of humour and life lessons. Karen, with her infectious laughter, had been the perfect counterpart, adding just the right amount of chaos. I felt a deep appreciation for their willingness to step in when I needed it most. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The crisp air felt invigorating, and I noticed how the world around me was still moving, oblivious to my heartache. People were out enjoying their lives, jogging, walking dogs, or chatting with friends. It dawned on me that life continued to unfold, and I wanted to be part of it again. As I walked, I reflected on my relationship. It had felt like an anchor dragging me down, and now, freed from its weight, I could finally breathe. I understood that heartbreak, while painful, could lead to growth. The moments I shared with my aunt and her friend reinforced that I was not alone. I had a support system willing to lift me up. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Aunt Linda. "Hey, darling, let's plan a girls' night. Wine, laughter, and maybe some karaoke? How does that sound?" I grinned at the thought. I quickly replied, "Count me in. I need more of that chaos in my life." That week passed in a blur of anticipation. Each day felt a little lighter as I prepared for our get-together. I even started listening to music again, rediscovering songs that had once brought me joy. I remembered how much I loved to sing, a passion I had set aside during my relationship. It was liberating. The night of our girls' night arrived, and I was excited. I donned a favorite outfit, one that made me feel confident and free. When I arrived at Aunt Linda's house, the familiar scent of her famous chili wafted through the air, mixed with the sound of laughter echoing from inside. "Welcome to the party," Aunt Linda exclaimed as she opened the door, a glass of wine already in hand. Karen was there too, wearing a tiara and a playful grin. "I'm the karaoke queen tonight," she declared, striking a pose. We settled in, the atmosphere warm and inviting. As the night progressed, we shared stories, our laughter echoing through the house. We sang our hearts out, belting out pop anthems and cheesy ballads, each song a celebration of reclaiming joy. At one point, Aunt Linda paused, looking at me with sincerity. "I just want you to know it's okay to grieve, but don't forget to live. You have so much to offer the world." Her words struck a chord within me. The night flowed seamlessly, and as we sat around the table with our glasses raised, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I realized I was healing, not just because of their support, but because I was beginning to choose happiness again. I didn't have to rush the process. It was okay to take my time. In the following weeks, I continued to embrace life's little moments. I reconnected with friends, explored new hobbies, and even joined a local singing group. Each step was a celebration of my newfound freedom. Aunt Linda and Karen became regular fixtures in my life, their playful energy a reminder of the importance of laughter. One afternoon, while out with Aunt Linda, we stumbled upon a small cafe hosting open mic night. "You should perform," she encouraged, her excitement contagious. I hesitated, the old insecurities creeping in. But then I remembered the nights filled with laughter and support. With her encouragement, I decided to give it a try. As I stood on that small stage, microphone in hand, I felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. I chose a song that had always resonated with me, one about finding strength after heartbreak. As I sang, I poured my heart into every note, the energy from the audience lifting me higher. When I finished, the applause was thunderous, and I felt a surge of empowerment. Afterward, I spotted Aunt Linda and Karen, beaming with pride, their support unwavering. I realized that my journey was not just about moving on. It was about rediscovering myself, about finding joy in the unexpected. As the months passed, I continued to embrace this new chapter. My heart still bore the scars of past love, but they no longer defined me. I had learned to dance through the mess, to laugh even when it felt impossible. Each moment with my aunt and her friend became a cherished memory, a reminder of resilience, love, and the power of connection. In the end, I learned that heartbreak can lead to beautiful beginnings. It taught me to value the people around me and to lean on them when I needed support. As I stood on the brink of new adventures, I felt ready to embrace whatever life had in store. And as I looked back on that fateful night when my drunk aunt and her friend stepped in, I smiled, knowing it was the catalyst for my transformation. A reminder that sometimes laughter truly is the best medicine. The months rolled by, and as summer turned into fall, I felt a shift within me. I had taken to heart Aunt Linda's words about embracing life and finding joy, and it was transforming my everyday experiences. Each day became an opportunity to explore new avenues of happiness. With Aunt Linda and Karen by my side, our girls' nights became a cherished routine. Each gathering was a mix of laughter, music, and storytelling, but also moments of sincerity where we shared our struggles and dreams. We became a little family, bound not just by blood but by our shared experiences and a commitment to lifting each other up. One evening, as we settled in for our usual night of karaoke and snacks, I noticed Aunt Linda's demeanour had changed. She seemed more reflective than usual. After we had shared some laughter and drinks, I asked her, "What's on your mind, Aunt Linda?" She paused, looking at Karen and then back at me. "You know, life has its ups and downs. Sometimes I feel like I've missed out on certain things, like taking risks or pursuing my dreams. I got so caught up in responsibilities." Her honesty struck me, and I could see a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. Karen jumped in, her expression serious but supportive. "We all have our regrets, but it's never too late to start over. We should inspire each other to chase those dreams." The conversation turned deep that night, weaving through stories of aspirations and missed opportunities. I learned that Aunt Linda had once wanted to travel the world, to see new places and experience different cultures, but life had taken her down a different path. Hearing her share this made me realize that everyone carries their own burdens hidden beneath the surface. Inspired by our discussion, I suggested, what if we make a list of things we want to do or try before the year ends? It could be anything, big or small. Their eyes lit up at the idea, and we immediately got to work, creating a list filled with adventures, both silly and serious. As the weeks passed, we began checking off items on our list. We tried new restaurants, attended local art shows, and even took a spontaneous weekend trip to the beach. With each new experience, I felt a sense of empowerment and freedom that I hadn't known before. The world felt vast and full of possibilities. One weekend, we decided to tackle one of Aunt Linda's dreams, a cooking class. None of us were culinary experts, but the thought of creating something together excited us. The class was filled with laughter as we fumbled through recipes, spilled ingredients, and ended up with a dish that barely resembled the chef's masterpiece. Yet it didn't matter. The fun was in the process, in the chaos of our attempts, and in the memories we were making. Another item on our list was to volunteer together. We found a local animal shelter that needed help, and as we spent the day caring for the animals, I felt a profound sense of joy. It was humbling to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, and the laughter shared while playing with the dogs and cats reminded me of the importance of community and compassion. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on how far I had come since that fateful night when my aunt and her friend had burst into my life. I was no longer the heartbroken person I once was. I had transformed into someone stronger, someone willing to embrace the messiness of life. Then came the evening of our final girls' night of the year. We decided to have a potluck dinner, with each of us bringing a dish that represented our journey over the past months. I opted for a simple pasta dish, comfort food that reminded me of family gatherings in my childhood. Aunt Linda brought her famous chili, and Karen whipped up a dessert that could only be described as a sweet explosion of flavours. As we sat around the table, our conversation flowed naturally, filled with warmth and laughter. I shared my reflections on the year, how grateful I was for their friendship and support. "You both helped me find myself again," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. Aunt Linda smiled, her eyes glistening. And you've reminded us that it's never too late to chase our dreams. We raised our glasses, toasting to friendship, resilience, and new beginnings. As we clinked our glasses, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. This was more than just a girls' night. It was a celebration of growth, love, and the connections that make life meaningful. Later that evening, after we had eaten and sung our hearts out to our favourite songs, Aunt Linda proposed an idea. Let's start a new tradition. Every year, we should have a night to reflect on our growth and set intentions for the upcoming year.